Excellent. Welcome everybody to our City of Courtenay's regular council meeting for March 22nd. I'll just do a call to order and start by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we gather on is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Morin to discuss World Water Day.
Sorry. Good evening, everyone. I just want to acknowledge that today is World Water Day. We're very fortunate to live in a community with fresh, clean water, partially due to the way we protect it, but also due to a wonderful new water treatment plant. But of course, around the world, there are many folks who do not have clean, safe drinking water. And the Indigenous folks across North America and in particular Canada, of course, there's many communities that don't have clean drinking water. So it is a day to reflect on, I think, the sacredness and importance of clean, safe water. The UN campaign is called Be the Change, and it encourages people to take action in their own lives to change the way they use, consume, and manage water. So I know we could definitely do more work on how the amount of water we consume. So thank you for that, and enjoy World Water Day. Thanks.
Cheers. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Hilling. Thanks, Councillor Moore. I appreciate that. And I'll just do a quick acknowledgement that members of council, staff, the BIA, RCMP, our medical health officer, et cetera, met with our Downtown Business Association last Thursday to listen to their concerns. And I just want to acknowledge all the time that everybody put in to prepare for that event and to actually attend. So, and I'm sure we'll probably be talking about it later on. Introduction of late items. Excellent. It's been moved. Excellent. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. And we'll move on to adoption of minutes. So we have, yes, Councillor Hillian.
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if you would entertain a motion to vary the agenda by moving the item under 8.1 to 7.1. And if people are willing to consider that, I can speak to the rationale.
Okay, yeah, so that's taking 8.1 and making it 7.2. And that would basically take it from being a notice of motion to actually being a council resolution to be passed. Yes,
and in speaking to this, Mr. Mayor, I acknowledge that it's a slight departure from procedure, although well within rules of order. It is something that staff have knowledge of, and following on the heels of the meeting with downtown businesses last week, I think the sooner we have the opportunity to move forward and do whatever preparation may be required, the better. So that's the rationale for dealing with it tonight rather than in 2 weeks' time.
And that's been moved by Councillor Hilling, seconded by Councillor Jolicoeur. I don't see any further questions or comments. Hang on, our clerk has a comment.
Sorry, can I just confirm that we're changing that to 7.2, not 7.1? You didn't want it to be considered at the same time as 7.1, did you?
Wow.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard what he said, but I knew what he meant. So I changed it. Sorry, I should have been clearer on that. All right, so we're clear. It's going to be 7.2. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for doing that. And we'll move back into our adoption of minutes. If somebody would like to move the recommendation to move both sets of minutes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Thanks, Councillor McCollum. We'll get through this meeting yet. It's all good. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And we're going to get into our delegations. So we first have our Comox Valley Ground Search and Rescue with Bronwyn Beadle and Darren Boss is what I have on the list here. Hopefully I've pronounced your names 100%. Correct me if I was wrong. And you can just press the little microphone button in the middle there and I'll turn on the podium microphone. And,
got it?
And
do I speak? Okay. Yeah, that was right. Put that down. Does that work better? Perfect. So my name is Bronwyn Beadle and Darren Boss is sitting over here. I'm the treasurer and he's one of the directors at large. And we'd like to thank the mayor and council for allowing us to address you this afternoon. We have two asks. Oh, I have to use this, sorry. We have two asks. One is that Comox Valley SAR be recognized as first responders in our own right. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the second one is without cost allocation to support the building of a permanent home for Comox Valley SAR by giving us a piece of land. I use the Grant Road Harmston property because it's approximately the right size, 1 to 1.5 acres. And location is everything. And it's a really good location. I understand you probably have it for other areas, or other items, but this is the one we were looking at. It's good location because it's good access to the Courtney, the Browns, the Puntledge, and the Solon Rivers, where our call outs are always high urgency emergencies. It's close to good access to the highway, which gives us access to Strathcona Park and all the areas within the parkway. And it gives us access south to Cook Creek and Rosewall Creek and to the Oyster River areas. It gives us good access to urban areas. And in our last 5 call outs, 4 of them have been urban searches since January. And it's a central location for our members to access the hall for disbursement, movement of equipment and vehicles. And it gives us good access to the air park for helicopter pickup, which we use regularly, get to the backcountry for medical rescues. It has good services, good internet connection, and good radio lines to our repeater site on Mount Washington and to the repeater site at the hospital. In addition, as we are the first responders when fire, police, ambulance, and the RCMP as police cannot get to a subject. We're the ones that go. The Comox Valley is considered an outdoor recreation utopia, and that's the part that's in the Experience Comox Valley, and it was in last year as well, because we experience round the year adventures on either 2 planks to 2 wheels. That's what it says in the book. So before I speak more about our ask, I want to frame what we do. We go out in 24/7, 365 days of the year, and you hear about us going out in the backcountry to do that. But you often don't hear about us being in the urban center. Comox Valley SAR is the busiest team on Vancouver Island and is recognized as a leader in large-scale complex operations. And we are often called to go out all over the province. We're the ones that help seniors with dementia and bring them home. We often go out for those to find those struggling with despondency, and we bring them home or not, but we may find them. And that's what we did twice since Christmas. And with the unhoused, we are the ones who will often go out and for the coroner's office, bring those people back if they try and take their own lives. We also help with forest fires and with flooding if we're called in. We tend to be humble to a fault. So often our work is done in the quiet when you don't see us, because we don't have little red trucks. Oh yeah, we have yellow trucks instead. But we are on call, like I said, 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. So our budget. Currently, we are the only team on Vancouver Island that's paying an annual rent for our operations. And we figure that by the time Comox Valley Emergency Program moves out at the end of July, that we will be paying about $80,000 in rent because the landlord has already given us notice that it's going up. So all our costs have increased as well: insurance, equipment replacement, fuel, travel, and training. Last year was the first year that we got allocated funding through the provincial budget, but this only meets about 50% of our operational budget. All islands on the all island teams, except CDSAR, have land and facilities given to them by the region, district, or municipalities, and they pay no extra amount. The most they pay is about $1 annually. Campbell River shares with the fire department. Nanaimo SAR, you can see the picture on the left, has just opened a new facility. They took over one of the fire departments in Nanaimo and rebuilt it. Aerosmith, which is on the right, just built a new one. Kent Harrison on the right down bottom there, they built one that's opened in 2000 at 1.8 million. Northern Okanagan, which is the one on the left, is just going into one at 3.4, and Central Okanagan announced an $8.4 million one in January. The vision we have right now is we have been looking at approximately 10 sites throughout the valley over the past 3 years, and they're either way too far out, so they don't have some kind of Wi-Fi or radio reception or cell reception, or they are too expensive. So our vision is really a very simple steel post-disaster building, something along these lines. This is just an example, and it will cost about $1.5 million to completion. We're fairly frugal. Our response vehicles are all secondhand as opposed to a lot of the other teams, which all buy brand new ones. We have about $5,000 into GICs, which we save through donations and through our fundraising and through our own savings. Comox Valley is ineligible for the 250 capital grant because the cost of our project is going to be over 1.25 million. There is nowhere from Campbell River south to Victoria on the east side of Vancouver Island that a building can be bought or built for less than 1.5 for the amount of area we need. But the capital gaming grant is a one size fits all, so we do not qualify. So how do we make it work for us? We cannot afford land and the building, even the one we are currently renting. We have just received notification of a monetary support from the regional district, but we need the donation of a piece of land at a nominal rent to construct a building. We know that you pay a portion of that money, and we're very grateful to you. Fundraising is negatively impacting the training, our morale, the replacement of equipment, and the modernization. And this is something we need to keep our team as number one. And we are, as one of the number ones, I should say, we are falling behind other teams due to the pressure and the requirements that we've had to put towards saving money for a new building. We are the only team in the Comox Valley in the first responders who are sorting cans and bottles at the landfill to make ends meet. We're probably the only team in BC doing this, but we're not going to go looking to see if we are. So I'd like to restate, to finish up, we'd like recognition as first responders in our own right. And although I gave the example of a specific parcel, we are open to considering other sites. We are looking for a parcel that is approximately 1 acre, has good access to the river and highway, the air park and all points in between, and has good services, especially internet and radio, and has parking for our members. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be more than willing to answer some questions.
Excellent. Thanks very much. While I'm waiting for some lights to turn on, maybe a quick question might be just being that it's the Comox Valley SAR, whether or not other municipalities like the CVRD and Comox, if everybody's being approached at this moment in time?
Yeah, we've already approached Cumberland. Comox is kind of out of the way for where we need to be, but we would hope that they would do it through CVRD. And CVRD, we are also working with at this point to see if there's something else. But we need to approach all of you.
Yeah, no, fair enough. No, I appreciate that. And we do have Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for today and for obviously so much else. I just wanted a little bit of clarification just on the first point. Recognition as first responders. I just wanted to know what that would entail, how one would do that, and how that would assist you with the work that you're doing.
What we feel is that if we were recognized as first responders, it wouldn't always be catch up to try and say, we're going, and we wouldn't be pushed off to the side. Right now, the first responders are recognized as the BC Ambulance Service, the fire department, and the police. We can get called by any of them, or we can get called by others. Sometimes we're called after the fact. So we're not recognized in the press so much because it's the others that go. So it gives us a leg up to be profiled.
So not to say that it's just symbolic, but it's recognition in a very tangible way of the work that you do. Would it have legal implications that would assist you in any way?
I don't think so, because we are volunteer as opposed to the scheduled groups. So I don't think so. I'd have to check that out for sure.
Okay, all right, but thank
I
you.
don't know.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. I might just do a quick follow-up just because I was just at the volunteer firefighter dinner on Saturday night. And so kind of in that same vein of the volunteer side of things, are there other municipalities or examples where the search and rescue are considered first responders? Because I think that, like, it's always great if there's another municipality or system that we can look to.
Squamish, for example, the police and the search and rescue operate on an equal level, and they just divide tasks. I guess they may have so many they don't have to worry about it, but anyway, they just divide it. I think Vernon is a similar one, and that's why they got the new building for them. So that does happen in some of the communities, that there's an equal level.
And my apologies, Councillor Warren. I'm just going to do a quick subsequent now that we're going down this little rabbit hole. But did I hear you correctly? Was it Vernon or Squamish where the RCMP and the search and rescue are sharing a building, or they just got their own building?
No, they each have their own building. It's just that Squamish Fire and Squamish SAR, they just divide up the tasks. There's none of this, oh, you're fire, so you have to go first. It's just an equal status. And so because of the equal status in places, particularly Vernon, it's considered the same for facilities and services.
Okay, that helps me a lot. Thanks so much for that. Councillor Warren.
Great, thank you, Mayor. A couple things. I'm wondering, first of all, how much is your total budget?
Our operational budget is about 250,000.
So the province gave about half of that, is that correct?
No. Province gives through the BC Sarah group, the umbrella group. We can access, depending on our qualifications and our standard in those qualifications, up to $100,000. That's what we can access. Anything over that is more, and we have a fair amount of specialty teams, which are the caliber 3, which is the highest level. And so our costs are essentially higher, but we're capped at a certain level.
Right. I guess I was just getting a sense of the provincial government is now is allocating that funding, though. Is that correct?
They give an amount to BC Sarah,
Yes.
the umbrella group, and the BC Sarah group distributes it through an allocation process, and everybody's allocation is different based on the specialty teams that we have.
Great. No, I wanted that clarification, just going back to the point that Councillor Cole Hamilton made around recognition, because it appears as though, even though it's not enough, that the provincial government there is a bit of that recognition that in terms of first responders. And we have a body, the Union of BC Municipalities, where we advocate to the provincial government on a variety of things, and we can submit resolutions, and that might be an avenue to do a resolution in future. The deadline's passed for this time around, but to ask the province to recognize search and rescue as first responders as part of that group. So that might be one way that we can advocate for that recognition, but just putting that out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin, and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is an issue that we need to tackle as a region, having a suitable location for first responders, whether you're officially recognized that way or not. That's the work that you're doing. And I mean, I'm sure that there is a way to address this over the next short while, hopefully, whether that location is, the one that you suggested or something else that we find suitable. I think that there's a recognized need both here and at the regional table that needs to be figured out. But my question is, from what I understand, although you would, I'm sure, be able to clarify this, is that the Arrowsmith search and rescue building did receive some type of funding from higher levels of government, whether it was federal or provincial. And I know that the example that you used, it's been a bit of a dead end just because of the cost of what this facility needs are. And I'm curious if there's been any dialogue with our MLA and whether she's been able to identify some, solutions as to how maybe the province can also help provide some funding for this project. I know at the regional table, we've increased the budget to try and help this process along. And I'm curious if the province has been open to looking at that as well.
We have been to see the MLA. We have not been successful so far. We've seen her over the last 3 years, probably 3 times. We're hopeful that she would be able to do something, especially since they seem to have a surplus. The Arrowsmith group did not get there's no federal funding for it, but they got through the Qualicum town or whatever. I don't know if it's town, I think it is, or village. They got a lot at the airport and the services were put in for them, and they pay $1, I think, a year for the use of that. They put up the building, and it's a similar thing that we were looking for.
That is, yeah, I mean, there seems like we should be able to provide some type of opportunity if we put our heads together. So, yeah.
My biggest problem is I don't know what the city owns. And I use that parcel as an example because I know that one. I don't know a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure, what to say as a follow-up there, but I hope that the province is able to help this along, because I mean, really the discrepancy between what that capital fund is and the size of this project seems pretty minor. And yeah, hopefully they can help us get to some type of resolution here, because it is a lot of money to expect a volunteer organization to fundraise as a community. So I would just recognize that there is support by your local government to try and help you find a solution here. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum. Yeah, and just as a follow-up, I mean, one of the challenges we have as a municipality locally is we don't have a lot of land to begin with, and then we get about 7 cents on the tax dollar that is collected from all of residents, and most of it goes to the province and the feds. And we don't actually get even enough money to deal with our own roads, water, and sewer, and we're often fighting other municipalities for grant money just to do the things like the 5th Street Bridge and et cetera. So, but as Councillor McCollum was saying, yeah, advocation I think is good, and making sure our MLA is 100% on it. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I actually learned a lot in reading the presentation beforehand. I had a few questions that were answered through your speaking notes. I guess a few curiosities that I have. Really interesting to hear about the statistics on the urban responses. I don't think that's something that immediately came to mind for me. So I really appreciate you kind of unpacking some of those examples. Is there somewhere that we can publicly accessible data on the work that you do? You mentioned some things today, but I'm wondering if there is a location. And then my second question, in terms of specifics for your presentation today, you mentioned geolocation and some of the key attributes that you're looking for. How much of the responses or the activities of our search and rescue are reliant on access to the air park?
I can't give you the exact stat right now, but what I can tell you is in the 10 years that I've been with search and rescue, the amount of medical rescues has increased probably by, I think we were down at like 3 before, we're probably 50%, at least 50, like 200% more. So the medical rescues are we generally will fly out of the air park. We'll bring the helicopter in there. It's close access. We get in there, helicopter, we go up, we get them, or we do whatever we can. We may drop the individual back at the air park, or we'll take them to a location where they can be driven out. It depends on the number of people, the injury, whatever it is. But generally, we'll bring them back in here.
Okay.
It's a very convenient air park.
And the question around data, and I guess just so you know where I'm coming from, because I was quite surprised when you said that we are the busiest team on Vancouver Island. So
we have been for years, and we do have the data. I don't have it obviously with me, and I don't have it in my head, but we do have the data for the last 50 years.
great. I think that would be really, just as a follow-up there, really useful for our advocacy efforts and speaking to other levels of government. And as Councillor Morin spoke of a mechanism through UBCM to elevate some of your requests today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor Cole-Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was just thinking about your comment that that land in Comox would not be appropriately located just because of the geography of the valley, and that certainly makes a lot of sense to me. Often, Courtney, because of the geography of the valley, we end up being the location for a lot of crucial infrastructure, and we're always happy to contribute our part, certainly as part of the Comox Valley. I think I'm not sure if you're planning to go to Comox, and you said they would be able to contribute through their CBRD contributions, and of course, so do we. It might be worth going to the other communities, even if you're not asking for land from them, to see if they might be able to contribute financially. I think all of our residents benefit from your services and from knowing that you're there. And I think giving the other communities an opportunity to contribute in their own ways would be.
We have been talking to Cumberland already.
Okay.
I mean, you're not the only ones.
Yeah, oh, not at all.
So yes, we are talking to Cumberland, and we are talking to the regional district, because those and Courtney, because you guys are on this side of the.
Exactly. I'm just saying that
river.
I'm sure Comox wouldn't want to let their geography get in the way of being able to help.
Oh, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
So perhaps stop by their town hall as well.
Yeah, we probably will.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cole-Hamilton and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks very much for coming today. I must say you're very bold in just coming right out and asking us for a piece of land.
We're getting desperate.
Yeah. Well, sometimes that's the best way to get things, is to just be direct and ask for them. Quite frankly, I find it scandalous that your volunteers are having to collect bottles to make ends meet. And but we'll have to talk to our staff about this issue and see whether we can help in the way you're requesting directly or not. And that'll be based on a whole range of factors. We generally don't discuss land disposition issues in public. But I certainly support the comments of my colleagues around helping to advocate towards higher government. And I appreciate the fact that the presentation you shared tonight did come to the regional district, where there was agreement to provide $100,000 a year towards this project. And hopefully we can come to the table in some useful way as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I think that's brought us to an end, but I really appreciate your presentation today. It's really enlightened us on some things. If you do have those that data, which could be useful, you can forward that on to staff and it'll get to council so that we can have that information as well. But with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Oh, it's all good. Fantastic. All right. Next we have 5.1.1 public notice of late filing of campaign financial disclosure statement. There's a recommendation. Do we need to have it? Do you want to speak to it first, Mr. Garbutt, or?
Thanks. Pursuant to the legislation, we have this report in front of you, just for your consideration and receipt.
Okay. So if somebody would like to move the recommendation, or if you've got any questions or comments. Councillor Hillier.
For information.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that the report entitled Public Notice of Late Filing of Campaign Financial Disclosure Statement be received for information.
All right. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously, and we're on to the Parks Control Bylaw Modernization Project update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Some of you may recall in 2018 Council, we received direction to work on a number of bylaw issues, particularly in and around smoking was an item. Staff have taken that direction, and also, as we've discussed at the council table, we have a number of issues related to our current bylaws in the public spaces. Ms. O'Connell, I think, may speak very briefly, and then Mr. Graff, I think, is going to deliver their presentation.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're actually joined virtually by the consultant who's helping to lead this project in conjunction with the city, NAV. So I don't know, Adriana, can you show NAV's smiling face up there, please? There he is. So I'm going to go through the first couple of slides, and then really NAV is the project manager leading us through the process. Peter and I are definitely contributing to it, but he'll take us through the project plan and the various phases. And then all three of us can answer questions depending on what area the questions apply to at the end of the presentation. And can you just shrink it so it's just now?
And they're not waiting to come in.
It's close. Okay, so for the background, as Jeff mentioned, we had direction back in 2019 from council to prepare bylaw regarding the prohibition of smoking and cannabis. Cannabis currently is regulated by the province and isn't permitted within park space already. The only piece is with the current parks control bylaw, we don't have any authority mechanism. So that's solely done through the tobacco regulation enforcement body, which there are not very many of. So the enforcement is really non-existent. At the same time, in reviewing the bylaw, it became very apparent that there were a lot of catalysts and or justifications for taking a deeper dive. For example, we know in the development of encampment response procedures that the bylaw is not in compliance with current case law. So even though our practice is in compliance with case law, the bylaw is not. So because there's been legal changes around the authorities of local governments, especially in regard to human rights, that also necessitates further amendment to the bylaw. Lastly, the bylaw itself, as an example, is only a few pages long. In the comparison, I think Nev was very surprised to find that most are 30 pages plus. So we really have a lot of very significant gaps, whether it's on the clarification of what can be done in parks versus what can't. Both gaps exist. There's not a lot to do with enforcement itself, and not a lot of mechanisms, definitions. It's really just needs a very good overhaul. So that's why we've got NAV on board to assist both Peter and I. So just a bit about NAV and what makes him so special. You might remember NAV from the Strengthening Communities transition process. So he was the consultant that helped us facilitate that transition of the grant from the CVRD. The reason that NAV was selected to roll with this work with Cascadia Partners is basically he has 17 years of experience in public service. So it's very rare that you find a consultant who's actually done the operations as well. So that's a very big benefit, both with the City of Vancouver and the City of Victoria. Before joining Cascadia, he was the Assistant Director of Parks and Rec for Victoria. So he has local island experience. And while at Victoria, he helped redo their parks control bylaw and oversaw the development of the tree bylaw. You might be familiar with some of the challenges the City of Victoria has had in regard to their parks in recent years, and that all of that work NAV was a big part of. So really, NAB has a history with the city on the more social side of the work that we're doing, but he has a lot of very technical and practical experience. So he brings with him a lot of useful information that's going to help guide us on this process. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Nav, and Nav, you just need to say slide when you want me to advance, and he'll walk us through the project plan.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for Kate for the lovely introduction. I feel very welcome. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, I'll start by presenting an overview of our project approach, which consists of the 4 phases that are shown on this slide. The primary objective of the approach is to develop an updated Parks and Open Spaces bylaw that effectively addresses the most pressing issues. So as Kate mentioned, there's quite a few within the existing bylaw. This requires a data-driven approach that gathers pertinent information about how parks are currently being used, and then the challenges that are associated with the existing bylaw. A key action also is to identify and incorporate best practices and effective strategies from park regulation bylaws and other relevant jurisdictions into the updated bylaw for Courtney. So this means taking an evidence-based approach to updating the bylaw that draws on successful practices from other communities. An important step as well as to engage with the internal and external stakeholders to establish key priorities and objectives the updated bylaw should address. This means taking a collaborative approach that incorporates feedback, including those that are most impacted by the bylaw. And then finally, we aim to ensure that the updated bylaw aligns with the city's strategic priorities, supporting a holistic approach to parks and open spaces management that meets the growing community's needs. And so just ensuring that the bylaw is consistent with the city's broader vision and goals. And so by taking a thoughtful and collaborative approach, we can ensure that the updated bylaw effectively addresses the most pressing issues related to the park system and supports the city's overall goals. Next slide, Kate. So on that previous slide, you'll have seen that we've completed phase 1 of the project, and we're concluding phase 2 now. And phase 2 included a comprehensive analysis of the bylaw. So this fancy graphic shows the 3 components of the analysis, which involved a stakeholder engagement, comparison of municipal bylaws from other municipalities in British Columbia, and a case law review. And so the stakeholder analysis focused on gathering information from internal stakeholders up front, basically on the emerging needs of the city's park system and identify the most pressing issues with the existing bylaw. This work was completed through a series of one-on-one meetings with the city manager and various relevant department directors. In parallel to that, we completed a municipal comparison to identify best practices in parks and open spaces management. I'll speak to that in a bit more detail in the next slide and the results of that analysis. To validate our findings and establish a set of priorities, we used information that we gathered from our one-on-one meetings and information gathering and from our municipal comparison to guide a workshop with staff from multiple departments. So in effect, we've built a bit of an internal working group, and that includes staff from bylaw services, public works, recreation, culture, building services, engineering, and the fire department. During our workshop, I came up to Courtney. I wanted to come and take a look at the park system itself, because I think that really makes a difference. And when you're doing this type of work, we in effect are impacting parks in Courtney. And so I think it's a good idea to be there and visit. So I had an opportunity to take a look at the park system. During the workshop, though, we reviewed pressing issues with the bylaw that we've mentioned and the outcomes of that comparison. We conducted a brief visualization exercise with the team about parks to just set the mood and get us ready to think about what the priorities could be. At which point we sat down through a bit of a priority setting exercise. In addition to that work, we've also connected with the health authority and are working with them to understand recommendations on key issues like smoking, vaping, as Kate mentioned. We've also been in contact with the Coalition to End Homelessness, and we'll be seeking their impact on impacts of any policy changes. And then finally, as I mentioned, we initiated a case law review to ensure that the updated bylaw aligns with legal precedents and best practices. At which point, currently there are a few areas where the existing bylaw does not. Next slide, please, Kate. So the municipal comparison, we compared the Parks Control Bylaw against bylaws from other municipalities, specifically in British Columbia. We chose to review park bylaws of the municipalities shown on this slide because these municipalities had similar climates and park usage as Courtenay, and they're experiencing similar challenges to what we've noticed with the city. Through this comparison, we identified gaps and areas for improvement for the city bylaw. And while it was clear that the park control bylaw needed improvement in all of the different categories listed on this slide and doesn't meet the existing and emerging needs of the city, the comparison did give us valuable insight into other jurisdictions' best practices and effective strategies that we may want to consider as we develop the bylaw here. And so to address the pressing issues identified with the bylaw and incorporate the best practices findings, staff will look to repeal and replace the existing bylaw with a new Parks and Open Spaces bylaw. Next slide, please, Kate. So on to our updated priorities. These are our draft priorities that we've put together and wanted to present to you today. Starting off with clarity and guidance to ensure a safe and enjoyable experience for all park users. Our first priority when developing new park bylaws is to prioritize clarity and guidance. This means making sure the language used in the bylaw is easy to understand, it outlines expectations and defines what actions are permitted and prohibited. As Kate mentioned, the existing bylaw doesn't do that. It doesn't have the comprehensive language around it to provide that, and can lead to confusion around what you can do in a park, what you can't do in a park, and who has jurisdiction over what rules that are enforced within that park. Another priority when developing the bylaw is to protect environmentally sensitive and culturally significant park areas. By including provisions that preserve these areas, we ensure the long-term sustainability of the park system and its preservation for future generations. Again, this is a new area within park bylaws that's being identified more and more, and it really is focusing in on these environmentally really important areas, in some cases provincially protected, that should have no activity on them. Or any kind of park use on them. And then in some cases, identifying culturally significant areas that also need to be protected. We also recognize the needs of homeless individuals who may seek shelter in parks. To accommodate these needs, the park bylaw must align with the case law associated with sheltering in parks, ensuring legal compliance and equitable access to parks for all community members. By doing so, we can create a safe and welcoming park environment for everyone. Again, as Kate mentioned, the existing bylaw is not in alignment with case law. However, the city itself has been, in practice, has been aligned. And so the shift that we'll look to make within the bylaw shouldn't be that significant of a change from what's actually in practice currently. And then finally, we prioritize developing a park bylaw that clearly defines the authority of the city manager or director is responsible for park management decision-making. And that just ensures that park management and decision-making are transparent, efficient, reduce confusion and conflict around park management, and clearly just outlines the authority for the people that need to make decisions if there's any sort of emergency or adjustment that has to happen in parks. Next slide. The first priority on here you'll see is on the slide is around enforcement and penalties, and the existing bylaw doesn't really have anything around that. And so we'll look to include clear and comprehensive language around offenses related to parks. And then by doing so, we can make enforcement more consistent and create a safer and more responsible park environment. Another priority is addressing smoking and vaping. I think we've touched on this already, Kate. But to align with what's actually in the case law, and then consider whose jurisdiction it is to enforce it. And then if desired, a park bylaw can play a role in enforcing existing cannabis smoking, vaping prohibition. You'll see the last two are that we have here are a bit more technical. I mean, future proofing is something that we would look to incorporate so that you wouldn't have a similar type of scenario going into the future. So we'll look at incorporating flexible language and provisions that can accommodate new and emerging issues related to park use and management, just to ensure that the bylaw can adapt and respond to the changing needs of the community and environment over time. And so that'll look at like what's the intent of a certain space, and how the city would intend on managing that area, and then the clauses will help reflect that. And so we're really keyed in on being able to provide that kind of future proofing through this process. And then finally, it's critical that the park bylaw adheres to legal requirements and aligns with legal precedents and best practices. So conducting a thorough case law review is an essential step to ensure that the updated bylaw is effective and legally defensible. Next slide. Okay, so the development of the new park bylaw requires a careful and thoughtful approach that reflects the needs and values of the community while protecting its environmental and culturally significant park areas. Prioritizing these objectives will help achieve the city's vision for parks and recreation, which is to support a healthy, engaged, and inclusive community with a high quality of life. So my parks background loves that statement. It's just come out as I started smiling as I started saying it. The next steps for us here are listed on the slide here. So we're going to work next towards developing and testing options. And so that'll look like us developing a set of clauses based on the priorities that we've listed. And then we'll test them with our internal working group and understand what of these are urgent, what's the impact of these items, and then are they feasible? Because those are really three categories we need to understand before we launch into applying a regulation. Once we get through that process, we'll next look to test the impact of these potential options with external stakeholders such as the Coalition to End Homelessness and the Health Authority, so that we gain a deeper understanding of in practice what does this mean. And then finally, we'll draft up a report for council review that will provide recommendations on the new bylaw, the direction it will take, and we'll seek your approval to draft the bylaw itself. And so with that, that's the end of our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. I know it's been a long time coming to get to this point, but really appreciate all the work that's been done up to this point. Councillor Hilling.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation and all the work involved. It strikes me that we live in a time full of contradictions, and trying to come up with a bylaw to govern the use of our parks, there's going to be contradictions inherent in that. So, for example, we don't want people to smoke in parks, but we acknowledge that some people who are unhoused are probably going to shelter in parks. They're probably going to smoke. They're probably going to use propane tanks to heat and not freeze to death. How do we resolve those sorts of contradictions? Do we just simply turn a blind eye? And if we do that, where does procedural fairness come into play, where we're potentially using our bylaw to enforce in some situations and not others based on the circumstances of the individuals involved?
Kate's going to answer.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Hilling, for asking that question. This is the one I was ready for. So essentially, Nav had referenced earlier in his presentation about really clarifying the intent of the bylaw. One of the unique ways that we're approaching the development of this bylaw is including explicitly within it intent statements. So in developing a regulatory or an enforcement framework, the intent would not necessarily be to cause harm to other individuals. So when you think about the use of substances, or things that have been put in place or come out of recommendations from the Health Authority for specific types of demographic groups, not demographic, but individuals, even though one of the recommendations may be to prohibit all of those things, with the intent being that that doesn't clash with the recommendations of the Health Authority and potentially cause harm to a vulnerable population within the park. How we go about applying that discretionary enforcement actually comes through the next project that's coming out of Bylaw Services, which is the development of the bylaw enforcement policy or the revision of it, the bylaw compliance strategy. So what those two documents then say, they inform how we're going to enforce the actual bylaws themselves. So even though you may have an individual who is living within the park system, or who may be struggling with alcohol addiction or another form of addiction, through the strategy or through the compliance strategy, you wouldn't see things like tickets or penalties being placed on those individuals. What you would see is if a group of folks decided to have a barbecue, they get super rowdy and they're imbibing, those are the folks that the bylaw would apply to. Because in looking at the intent of the bylaw, it's to really make sure that the space is equally accessible to all, but at the same time, we're not punishing individuals for things that are beyond their control or part of a larger, more systemic and complex issue.
Right, thanks for that. It's complex, and it's not often easy for members of the general public to comprehend in all situations, as you would know from much of the mail that we've received about park use and other related issues through this last few winters. My only request is that we find some way to vigorously police people who don't pick up after their dogs, and I think that would be a huge service to our parks. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, and Councillor Gilles.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm really happy to see this, and thank you for the presentation. It's quite clear that our current bylaw has significant gaps in meeting the emergent and responsive needs of our community with the issues that we're facing in society more broadly. I guess I have some specific questions on the staff report, but to begin, I guess my initial really only major concern is around process in this, and I'm glad that the slide that we're seeing now, because I just really want to ensure that that second, the arrow going from the first developed and test options and then going to stakeholder engagement. So I'm wondering if either staff or our consultant can speak to a policy development process that includes ensuring that the voices of people who are impacted by the bylaw are included prior to the development and testing of options, rather than only going to them after options. And beyond those who are impacted by what will come from this process, my question being from phase 1 and 2, and I understand phase 1 is complete, phase 2 is almost going to be complete. Is there an opportunity for a policy conversation at this table, at the council table, prior to the testing of options? I just, the way that I'm reading phases 1 through 4 at this point, my concern is that significant work will be done. And between now and the next time we have a conversation about the bylaw, it will be a draft ready for approval. And so I'm wondering if staff can speak to, or maybe our consultant can speak to those two process concerns that I have.
I can speak to the engagement component, and then Nav, if you're, can you talk to what happens, how we are accessing the stakeholders after, in regard to and why it comes after the development of the options? So in regard to, so this is just the next step. So what it's not showing is the step that is either currently in progress or the previous step. So one of the things that we're doing that's very unique is we're working with the coalition and have invited individuals who are living with lived experience as homeless individuals to come and help us create a unique criteria lens that we can then take to look at or apply to any of the options that we're looking at to gain a better understanding of the impacts and what the priorities may be. So that's the first layer that will be applied during the development of the options. One of the pieces with the development of options is there are some options that are not options because they are contradictory to the case law, or the level or significance of potential harm is too great that we wouldn't even put those forward to council as an option. Really what we're looking to do is through the case law, through the stakeholder engagement, through the best practices, through the information that's coming from the health authority, from the coalition, providing council with options within that framework. So that's when it comes back to council is you're going to know what's possible within that. And then you can kind of choose your venture within a range. It's the same thing. And now this is where I hope you can come in as to why we don't provide an open option prior to going to stakeholder engagement.
Hi, yes, I think it's hard to have good stakeholder engagement if the option is too broad and open. And so the intention is for us to first kind of internally work through what is actually feasible, because we don't want to set up any sort of empty calories engagement that could happen. So the intention first is to take kind of the information that we have something that people that we are going to engage with can chew on and build off of, take their input, and then refine as we go forward. The concern to go too early would be it's just certainly too broad as far as where we can go with it. And so that's why it's laid out the way it is.
And a really simplistic example is I remember doing a public hearing in the city of Vancouver, and they just asked, what do you want to do with this park? And everyone said a skate park. Unfortunately, a skate park, it was not an ideal location based on the location of skate park. So like, why ask if you can't do it in the first place? So just making sure that whatever options we're presenting are actually possible. And that way we really focus on that, because we're coming forward with something that's contrary to the health authority's recommendation or is going to violate case law. Unfortunately, they're going to be off the table. Not unfortunately, but they would be off the table as a policy option for council to consider.
Another question, Mayor?
Subsequent.
Yeah. It's only listed as far as I can see once in here. And just for myself and for the public, the language of open spaces, parks and open spaces bylaw. And we've spoken a lot about parks, but I'm wondering if you can, staff or a consultant can speak to what does open spaces mean and what may be some differentiation between the two.
Go ahead now.
Certainly, yeah. Open spaces in general mean hardscape spaces. So we would consider plazas would be an example. And so that's the distinction there. They're still used for outdoor community recreation, but they're not green living space like that.
An example would be the Randy Richard Plaza. Okay.
All right, thanks, Councillor Jolcoeur and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'm really thrilled to see this being done in the way that it is. We certainly have seen examples recently of some reactive responses in terms of bylaws, and anyone who was viewing the RD meeting this week would have seen that, you know, there can often be challenges with bylaws, exactly as Ms. O'Donnell talked about, where there's interpretation issues when they're too broad. So I just think that this approach is really appreciated, so that hopefully we don't get into those situations that other communities have gotten into. We know that bylaws are, you know, values driven by the community, but then of course we do have those other bodies of authority, like the health authority and others, that also play into that, and that balance is often really difficult. I think one of the things that I noticed in the report was that the cities that were chosen as comparable municipalities, they were prioritized if they recently updated park control and also shared commonalities and policy perspective. And I questioned a couple of the communities that were on that list. And I don't know, I mean, that work is already done, but I think there may have been a couple other communities that perhaps had more commonalities and policy perspectives that could have been looked at. I can name a couple, but I think that is really important to really have a good grasp or a good sense of those values and in terms of balancing that with the other regulations and things. So I'm just appreciative of the way this is being done, that we're not just doing this really quick reactive way of updating a bylaw, which to me just lands us in more trouble. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moran, and Councillor Joe.
Just because I haven't seen anyone else put out their light on, I did just want to have a follow-up to my original question. Looking again at phases 1 through 4, just confirmation from staff if we will have an opportunity to review the options once they are developed prior to staff coming with the draft bylaw for consideration.
Absolutely. So we will be coming to council with the options report that will include a recommendation to provide staff with authority to draft the bylaw. So you get to choose your own adventure, and then from that adventure, we will draft the bylaw
Thank you.
and then bring it back to a subsequent meeting.
Excellent. Great conversation. Really appreciate that. And really, we're just being asked to receive the update, but I think it's been a great discussion. So if somebody could move the all right, all those in favor? That's unanimous. And we'll move on to financial services and the parcel tax. Oh, yeah, thanks, Nav. I think he's gone. Sorry about that. Mr. Garvin. Oh, did it go on?
Through the mayor to council, Mr. Langemar is on. I believe he's zoomed into the meeting. He's just going to give a short introduction to this short report.
Hello, everybody. Wonderful to be here once again. Okay, good. You can hear me. I'm here today to inform council of the outcomes of the parcel tax roll review panel meeting that did not take place, as we received no submissions of complaints for the panel's consideration. Since no complaints were received by the deadline, the community charter dictates that the parcel tax roll for the year is deemed to be authenticated. This process occurs without the requirement to report back to council. However, I do like to provide information to council to close the loop on this annual requirement, as I was before council a few weeks ago, asking to set a date, time, and place for this meeting. The total frontage for sewer purposes was 205,509 meters. This brings in $2.1 million in sewer frontage taxes at $10.24 per meter. The total frontage for water purposes is 209,685 meters, and that brings in $1.2 million in frontage taxes for water at $5.84 per meter. And that concludes my report for today.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Adam. I really appreciate it. But we have generated some questions. So I'm just going to pass it over to Councillor Hilling.
No questions. Thanks for the report. I'll move that council receive the 2023 parcel tax review report for information, as the parcel tax roll is deemed to be authenticated per section 208.10 of the community charter.
Been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Excellent. All right, with that, we'll move into our council updates, starting with Councillor Cole Hamilton. All right, Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Two items of note. First of all, I attended a celebration at Lake Trail School with the Community Connections Organization to acknowledge Sheila McDonnell, a retiring school trustee who had been a key proponent of that project over many years, and an all-around stellar citizen involved in many supportive activities in our community. And so there was a good acknowledgement of her work by her colleagues at the school and in the surrounding neighborhoods. I also attended the Downtown Business Association event last Thursday night that was moderated by members of the Community Justice Center, and looked at the challenges that our downtown community is experiencing. And I just want to acknowledge Councillor Jolliker, the mayor, and CAO Garbett, along with the fire chief, who all took part along with other panelists. And we haven't heard the full debrief of the event yet, but it was certainly well attended, raised a lot of important concerns about the impact of urban issues, the housing crisis on our downtown community, the side effects that people are dealing with, and certainly raised many concerns that we need to address moving forward. So I'm pleased to be able to take part in that event. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Jolicoeur. Councillor McCollum.
Thanks. Yeah, I just have one quick item to update on as my role as Rec Commission Chair. We, the Rec Commission met yesterday and adopted the strategic plan and the capital plan that's come out of the work of a series of day-long meetings. There's quite a lot of discussion and work that went into that and over the last couple of months. So happy to report that we did adopt it. And the first item to come out of the capital plan will be initiating the work of a second artificial turf field at most likely the Vanier site. Staff came back and made a recommendation for a location, and that was supported by the board. And then subsequent to that is looking at the development of a new ice sheet further out, maybe in the next 4 to 6 years, depending on how things proceed. So yeah, just wanted to provide that. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, I just wanted to report that I took part, volunteered as others did on council with the point in time count, which basically surveys folks who are unhoused to get a sense of sort of the demographics as well as circumstances. And those reports go to the province and help inform some of the responses and resources that hopefully come forward. And of course, I only saw a small sample of folks, but it was, I actually find it an honor to speak to people who are willing to share their experiences. And I think we're going to see some new information because the count hasn't been done for a while. And there's a new question about COVID and whether COVID had an impact on people becoming unhoused. But I personally spoke to people who, had been working in good jobs, and one bad thing happens and there's a housing shortage, and then all of a sudden you're unhoused, and then your life just kind of deteriorates from there. So it'll be interesting to see what that final report reveals. But I guess another thing that there were certainly many people, I think, that were very recently unhoused who'd been here in the community for a very long time and probably appear to be new people, but they're just newly unhoused. But we'll find out what happens when we get all those reports back. And then I also attended the meeting with the Downtown BIA just as an audience member, and really appreciated the organization of that event. It was very respectful, and I think people were given a good opportunity to share their concerns, and we're certainly going to do what we can to relay those concerns and try to get some help with the challenges we're having. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore, and appreciate that. Over the last couple of weeks, I've attended Cumberland Forest Society's had some events just talking about some of the things they've been doing, as well as their AGM, which has been really useful to see all the work that they do in our community. And although they're called the Cumberland Forest Society, they do lots of stuff in Courtenay as well as Comox. Also attended the first situation table meeting that's really intended to provide some rapid wraparound services for those in need. And so that has started, and they're going through a training phase, but looking forward to other things that they're going to be able to do in our community. Also attended Vanier high school. I did some interviews with some students as well as talking to socials class. It was very interesting to see the questions the students had on how to actually become active in their community. So some really great kids there. Attended the Heritage Advisory Commission, which we'll probably get some minutes sometime in the future, but I had some discussions with them around their terms of reference as well as some of the projects that are ongoing. There was the Mayor's Cup, which I believe the hockey match raised about over $7,000 for kids sport in the Comox Valley. So great to see all the people coming together to raise funds so that kids who would otherwise not be able to participate in sports can do that. Saturday night was the volunteer firefighters dinner. Again, one of my great honors being able to thank the firefighters on behalf of our city and council, and really acknowledge the work that they put in, as well as their families that are all sacrificing. And lastly, I attended the cellular announcement yesterday, where the province is investing money to get good cellular coverage for the Highway of Tears up north, as well as between Canberra River and Port Hardy. For those that have ever traveled that, there is a large swath of land that and roadway that has no cellular coverage. So they're really focused on making that happen. And I've said it already, and it's been mentioned, but just again, a big acknowledgement for those that attended the BIA meeting on last Thursday night to talk about some really tough issues. So with that, we'll move on to Council Resolution 7.1 for Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is the motion: equitable access to mental health and substance use services in Comox Valley. Whereas the BC government has committed to utilize surplus and additional funding in budget 2023 for mental health and substance use services. And whereas the Comox Valley currently lacks the continuum of mental health and substance use services locally, including medical detox, inhalation overdose prevention services, mental health treatment facilities, managed alcohol programs, Indigenous healing services, substance use treatment facilities, and second stage housing. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Courtenay advocate to the Premier, the Ministers of Health and Mental Health and Addictions to increase funding to Island Health, local nonprofits, and private providers for the purpose of filling the gap in mental health and substance use services in the Comox Valley. And be it further resolved that the city write to regional local government partners to seek interest in submitting a shared regional letter to the BC government.
It's been moved and seconded. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And so this is really, for those of you that follow provincial politics, the province has, and our current government has made it quite clear that they're investing in our communities through increasing funding in mental health and substance use services. That looks like an additional $1 billion in this year's budget. And as many people have been following, there's also a surplus ending in, I guess, a week and a bit, where the province has also indicated the willingness to support some projects. And so this motion is really just for us to really make it clear that as a community that we're putting our hands up to say we are ready to receive these services. It was quite clear at our meeting with the DCBIA last week that a lot of the experiences people are having in our downtown core are related to mental health and substance use. Many of our community members are struggling with mental health, whether you're housed or unhoused, employed or unemployed. And so really this is really to continue to pursue some of the things that we heard in the Comox Valley substance use strategy that identified that in fact we continue to lack some of our core services that would support people from using substances and struggling with mental health to recovery into wellness. And these are just some of in the whereas statement, these are just some of the current gaps in the Comox Valley. My hope is if this passes today, that in fact a regional letter advocating and saying, hey, we want these services in our community needs them, that will send a strong message to the province that we're ready to support our community members and all the challenges that they face.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I certainly support the intent of this motion. I have to confess to feeling somewhat cynical about the province's likelihood of responding, given our experience with meeting with then Minister Eby on several occasions to talk about the crisis in housing in our community and the crisis in mental health. And one of the responses that came forward was that the province was going to move forward with an initiative called complex care housing. And we certainly jumped up and made it known that we were ready to come to the table and be a pilot community. We thought the needs were significant and that the proposal would help. And of course, we've seen nothing from that. And what we ended up with was a bureaucratic runaround between BC Housing and Island Health. So perhaps a cautionary tale, but I just hope that we have better success with this resolution. And it might be helpful if we copied Dr. Ann's, who's our medical health officer for the North Island. She was at the meeting last week with the downtown business people. And one of the calls that came out loud and clear from our business community is that when somebody who has a serious mental health issue is in a business or on the street causing concern and people don't know how to handle it, they have no one to call if it's not a police matter. And sometimes even if it is a police matter, the police are challenged to attend. So one of the ideas that came forward that we discussed with Dr. Ann's afterwards was some type of mental health response that could support people when they encounter somebody on the street or in their business who's actually having some type of critical episode. And Dr. Ann's was certainly keen on pursuing that through her offices. And I think this resolution speaks to that same sort of ability to respond. And while it remains critically important that we continue lobbying for housing for people, I think we also recognize that there are some people whose mental health challenges are going to continue to cause them to act out in the communities, and having these types of responses is going to provide our local residents and businesses with more sense of safety that they actually can call somebody and get some help when that situation occurs. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Helene, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you to Councillor Jolicoeur for bringing this forward. I agree. It is hard to not be cynical because we certainly have been, I think, very loud on this council, advocating numerous meetings with the province, asking for help, pleading for help in some cases. As many people know, many of us have experienced the challenges in the system. And I think often the general public doesn't realize that we don't have a lot of these services. They see lots of people, they hear about agencies doing great work out there, but we have huge gaps in terms of things like detox, alternative therapies, all kinds of having, access to treatment counseling, residential treatment, you name it. And if you can actually even find a spot, you're paying upwards of $8,000 to $20,000 a month. So we need publicly subsidized services for people, and we need them in this community because people are dying around us, and the rest of the community is also feeling the impacts. And we need to do more. And I just think we just keep pushing the province, and maybe they get sick of us at some point and actually give us some help. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. And really all that I have to add to it, I think, is certainly that that frustration around knowing that we have a complex issue and there's knowledge around what the solution is, but getting there has been absolutely difficult. But I love the fresh energy and the optimism in this motion. And so I will be doing everything I can do to work with our regional partners and anybody else to help bring this to a reality. So again, thanks so much for bringing this forward. That being said, all those in favor? That's unanimous. All right. Thanks so much for that. Next, we have Councillor Hillian.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that whereas numerous citizens and business owners have expressed concern this winter regarding the general appearance of West Courtenay, and whereas a coordinated community cleanup would provide the opportunity for citizens to work together to improve the current look and feel of the community, therefore be it resolved that the city organize a spring cleanup, including the following elements: engagement of local businesses and community agencies and their clients to focus on downtown and to include litter and graffiti. Encouragement and facilitation of neighborhood cleanups, including the trimming of hedges intruding on city sidewalks and the remediation of known sites of excess garbage. And if I could speak to that, Mr. Mayor, so this is a suggestion that's come forward from several citizens who have talked about acknowledging that in the wintertime, the months of January and February, things look pretty dreary and bleak at the best of times. But added to that has been a concern about litter, about graffiti, about general untidiness. And the suggestion has been made that if we work together between the city, our business community, our agencies, if there's a way of engaging people with lived experience, that not only would we actually give the city a bit of a facelift and brighten things up, but we would have the benefits of the members involved working together. And there's not a lot that we can do to change the situation on our streets, but this is something tangible that I think would actually give our community a bit of a lift. It would make people feel like something is actually being done, and could have some beneficial side effects. It's interesting that this idea has come forward from people living in the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown. It's come forward from people who have businesses downtown. And it also came forward at a meeting that Councillor Moran and I attended at the library with people with lived experience who spend time on the streets of our downtown. So it's a common desire to work together and do something positive for our community. And I'm hopeful that that our public works department and city staff can find a way to help coordinate something like this. I know they do these types of activities on an annual basis in any case, but I think we have a particularly dire need to do something positive together for our community, and appreciate if council supports this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I know myself and I think Councillor Jolicoeur have also attended those meetings on Fridays and with the Homeless Coalition. And it really is the whole community wanting to come together. And I really appreciate you bringing this forward. Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I wholeheartedly support this motion. I think it's quite clear that we need a win right now, and something that's generative and positive. I think that this is something, that everyone, notwithstanding where you are in our community, gets a little bit of that extra light with the spring weather coming in. And I think this could be really something positive that brings a stronger sense of belonging and connection between community members, some of whom might hold judgments of each other. And so I think it could actually go a long way around building relationships, and can generate potentially some further solutions just by actually going out and doing this work together. I guess the only thing that I'm curious about, and I know in previous conversations, an element to this motion that I was wondering, maybe staff can speak to it if it's not explicitly in the motion, but I'm curious, this is the 3 bullets are quite action oriented, their work. And I wonder if there's an opportunity in this, in the organizing of the spring cleanup, if there's an opportunity for a celebration or a community gathering, maybe food, some laughter, maybe some music for those who are partaking in the activities that are listed here. Just again, to build community, to celebrate a day of cleaning up our downtown core. And in West Courtenay more broadly. And so I'm wondering if staff can speak to that.
Susie's going to just run up to the microphone here. Oh, she's going to the podium. Perfect. Yep, just push it. I'll get the microphone turned on here for 1 second. There you go.
Great. Thank you for the question. I'm going to do my best to answer. Our Director of Public Works, Kyle, would be the best to answer, but he's away at this time. I think, pardon me? He's on a journey, literally. In discussion, just as we saw the notice of motion, I know Kyle had thought about how we would acknowledge the work that would be done by volunteers and how we would celebrate that. I can't speak to any specific plans, but definitely a piece of feedback or guidance that we can take into consideration.
As a follow-up, Mayor. I guess my curiosity is, again, if it's not listed in the motion explicitly, and there may or may not be costs as costs related to the provision of food or music, that if that's in fact the case, if we need to be explicit in the motion, or if there's already existing room in our operational budget for something like this.
I would say if there's not explicit room in the operating budget, then we would have to come back to council. But again, that would be up to our Director of Public Works to confirm.
All right. I think that answers the question. There's more lights blinking, so you may get called back up, but appreciate the answer so much. All right, Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Hillian for the suggestion. I know some of these things have come up as possibilities in the past, and I think the timing is great, and the community will is there, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to try and participate in a positive way around a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing. My question, I think, is probably for Councillor Hillian, but maybe staff as well. I know that you spoke at the beginning of the meeting to wanting to move this along with some sense of urgency. And I mean, spring is a nice time for doing this kind of work, whether it's trimming hedges or cleaning up litter. It's the time of year where people are starting to think about spending more time outside. And if we are looking at a weekend in the coming weeks, I would just like to maybe suggest that we do it on Earth Day, because it's the third Saturday of April. And there are already community cleanups that happen on that day as on beaches. And I thought it might be a way to, ladder those two things together. It's a way of showing some gratitude for the community in which we live. And it might just be another way to promote it and kind of expand it beyond downtown business and our regular contacts. So
Thanks, Councillor McCollum, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Well, Councillor Jolicoeur stole my thunder there. I was going to suggest as well, getting together, gathering with food is always a great way to build community. And I know there are some groups that will throw together a barbecue or whatever. So you never know. But I guess my question was around the logistics and who is actually organizing all the components of this, and do we have a sense of sort of the outline of this event and who's doing what?
This is Councillor Hillian's direction. However, we have discussed internally, it would be likely a combination of public works staff where we have our focus downtown and the BIA. Earth Day might be a little bit quick, but we certainly appreciate and understand the importance of trying to move forward on this. And I did, Mr. Shaw is on a well-deserved vacation right now, but I did have a conversation with him on the sort of refuse side, and we're in almost daily conversation with the DCBIA, it seems, right now. And I know, and I'm sure they would be very motivated to work together on this. And we would just have to see on the other aspects. But we do not have a formal program as it's currently stands.
Okay, thank you. And I just also want to acknowledge that we certainly do get feedback around city-owned buildings and city spaces as well. And we all need to do our part, I guess. Thank you.
Councillor Moore, been a great discussion. I know when I talked to Councillor Hillian, I think I might have mentioned the Earth Day thing just because it kind of came So I appreciate Councillor McCollum bringing that up. Time is challenging, but maybe I'll let you speak to it, Councillor Elaine.
Thanks, Mary. And this is something that our operational people need to work out, and I don't think it needs to be necessarily tied to one day. I think that if we put out the call, chances are people and organizations in the community will respond. And in terms of our own staff, I'm fine if things happen on weekdays and, we combine it with a weekend event as well. I know that my neighbors would all get together and do a neighborhood cleanup. We'll actually do it anyway, but if there's a day that lots of people are doing it, then it creates all those possibilities that we've talked about of coming together and celebrating. So, but I would leave the details to the operational departments that have all the resources that need to be deployed. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Elaine. And I think going back, I think it was 2015 with the centennial celebrations, there were community things, but I think there was a lot of logistics involved in volunteers. But yeah, it'd be great to see what happens. That being said, with no further questions or comments, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Again, thanks very much, Councillor Elaine, for bringing that forward. 8.1 is the Downtown Community Police Office. Again, just as a follow-up of the meeting last Thursday, this is just a notice of motion. So, but basically, whereas the DCPI raises a variety of safety concerns, and whereas the RCMP community police model has been implemented in other municipalities to benefit the community, therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to work with the RCMP and the DCPA to explore the option of a downtown community police office and report back to council. And this is again not something new. Well, it's just a notice of motion. Yeah, and the only thing I was going to speak to on it, and the only reason I was really saying it out loud, is this is not a new idea. This is something that has been talked. I know Councillor Helene's brought it up. And one of the things I did omit from this notice of motion is when we have talked about it in the past, it's not just RCMP, but even looking at other partners that might be able to work in there, whether that's members of the Coalition to End Homelessness, et cetera. So anyways, when it comes back, it'll probably be massaged a wee bit, but that I think the general intent is pretty clear. In-camera resolution. I don't think we have to.
No, that's fine. If someone moved it, I'll second it.
Yeah, we've been moved, we've been seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mary. I think that we should at least acknowledge for the public who may be here or watching that the reason that we're going in camera is related to subject matter being considered that relates to personal information about an identifiable individual, law enforcement, litigation, the receipt of advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, and information that is prohibited or if presented would be prohibited from disclosure.
All right. Thanks for reading that out, Councillor Hillian. Appreciate it. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous, and that's adjournment.